Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the 7th movie in the Friday the 13th series, Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, which came out in 1988. And according to the timeline on the Friday the 13th wiki, takes place in 1997, but okay, you know what? Before I get into this movie, I have to address the timeline of this series because it's bugging the hell out of me. In the last two reviews for The New Beginning and Jason Lives, I talked about the timeline and how those two movies actually take place at least 5 years apart from their release date. But I got to address this right now. So, in the original Friday the 13th movie, that's theorized to take place in 1979, even though the movie came out in 1980. In Friday the 13th Part 2, they established that the first movie happened 5 years prior to the events of Part 2, so that would be 1984. Then Part 3 happened the very next day, and then the final chapter again happened in the very next day. So they all take place within days of one another, 1984. Then A New Beginning actually takes place 5 years after the final chapter, 1989. And I had my doubts on when Jason Lives actually took place. A lot of people said it takes place 1 year afterwards, 1990. But I'm theorizing it could be 1992 at the very least, or 1993. So with this movie, according to the film's director, John Carl Buechler, after Jason was chained to the bottom of Crystal Lake by Tommy Jarvis, he's been underwater, chained up, for 10 years. So if I'm willing to accept the fact that Jason Lives takes place in 1990, and this movie takes place 10 years later, then that means that this movie, released in 1988, actually takes place in the year 2000, and the 80s just never died. If that sounds confusing, trust me, it's going to get a hell of a lot more confusing with the next movie. But regarding this movie, the movie actually opens up with Jason at the bottom of Crystal Lake, and we're introduced to this little girl named Tina who actually has psychic abilities, to the point where she actually accidentally kills her abusive dad. So, cut to 10 years later, again, according to the director, where Tina is a teen or young adult, and she's taken back to her home to try to work out her psychic powers. Unfortunately, though, she accidentally resurrects Jason Voorhees, which I'll touch upon that aspect a little later, and as usual, Jason starts killing people all over again, and it's a Friday the 13th movie. So this is actually a very interesting movie for many reasons. It's definitely a groundbreaking movie within the franchise, but this movie actually started off as Paramount wanting to do something a little grander, a little bigger. And in fact, they were actually looking to partner with New Line Cinema and do a crossover with the Nightmare on Elm Street series. So in a way, this was the first attempt to try to make Freddy vs. Jason. And this movie actually came out the same year as the 4th movie in the Nightmare series, The Dream Master. But things just fell through, a crossover never happened, and wouldn't happen until 2003. So instead, somebody suggested, why don't we do Jason versus Carrie? So they ended up pitting Jason Voorhees against a telekinetic girl, and in that part, it makes it one of the most unique entries of the series. But besides that, it's pretty much the same movie all over again, but retconning some elements from Jason Lives, which, being that that's my favorite of the franchise, kind of bugs me, because if you think back to Jason Lives, one of the biggest plot elements that I forgot to mention in my review was that the town of Crystal Lake actually renamed itself to Forest Green in an attempt to try to distance themselves from everything involving Jason Voorhees. And then all of a sudden, in this movie, there's a sign that says Crystal Lake 5 miles away. And I'm sitting here going, wow, guys, you took one of the most interesting concepts from the 6th movie and just completely ignored it, or you tried to just reverse that decision. It's like in the Star Wars sequel trilogy where somebody went, hey, you know that cool idea that Rian Johnson came up with where Rey's not related to any pre-existing character and made Kylo Ren the main villain of the trilogy going forward? Well, we're actually going to bring back Palpatine to make him the villain once again, and we're going to have him be Rey's grandfather. Now, I will say this, in Friday the 13th's defense, that whole Forest Green retcon is less offensive than what they pulled with the sequel trilogy. Because if we're going to be totally honest, the Friday the 13th series has had no regard for continuity whatsoever. especially considering that huge and complicated timeline that I just laid out for you at the beginning of this video. And I know some people might want to say that Jason coming back retcons the ending to the last movie where Tommy Jarvis returned him to his place of rest at the bottom of Crystal Lake. And let's be honest, like, the series prints money, so of course they'd have to make another Jason movie. But if you want an in-universe theory on why Jason came back, there's a theory going around that I find really fascinating. It's the theory that Jason Voorhees actually never drowned in Crystal Lake. He just got out of there, has been hiding in the woods for at least 30 years, and then after he saw his mother beheaded, according to the remake, he decided to take on the role of killing everyone around Crystal Lake to pretty much avenge his mother. And Jason Voorhees' actual place of rest is not at the bottom of Crystal Lake, but rather in the Jarvis home where Tommy Jarvis just killed him repeatedly. So that's an interesting theory, and again, if you want an in-universe explanation of how Jason Voorhees comes back, there you go. Now, finally getting back to this movie in particular as a movie. Like I said before, it is very much a Friday the 13th movie. Except this time it's played a little more seriously. It goes back to what I really didn't like about the previous movies, where there are moments where the movie's trying to be scary, it's trying to play it straightforward, but there are other moments that are just so unintentionally funny and goofy that you really can't tell if the movie's trying to be funny or if it's trying to make us frightened by these moments. And it doesn't work in this movie in particular because Jason Lives was a horror comedy. It knew its tone right from the get-go. And for this movie to not realize that the Friday the 13th series is kind of a joke at this point, whether intentional or unintentional, just really hurts it. And then of course the characters are just as stale as ever, and there's really nobody to latch onto in terms of actually caring for. I guess there's Tina, played by Lar Park Lincoln, and admittedly Tina is a cool idea because she's a girl with telekinetic powers, and considering that in the last movie Jason Voorhees was resurrected by a bolt of lightning and is now a zombie killer, I suppose a psychic is not too far-fetched in this universe. But in terms of Tina as a character, she's just kind of fragile, she's not too interesting, and I guess in theory, if there was somebody to like in this movie, it would probably be her, because I always try to make this rule when it comes to horror movies with lame characters. Always try to find one person to care about, and Tina just happens to be that person. Everyone else are just flat out stereotypes. You have the stereotypical stoner, you have the token black couple, you have the geek, you have the slutty blonde who is actually one of the more fun characters, I have to say. Susan Jennifer Sullivan plays Melissa, the archetype bitch character, and she just commits to this role. She is so into it, and probably more than Megan in the last movie, she is horny. I mean, all these characters in this movie, with the exception of Tina, are horny as hell. But with her in particular, she is just going around the entire cabin that her friends have rented from man to man, and it's like, wow, way to play up that stereotype. But outside of Melissa and Tina, all the other characters are just not worth talking about. Another thing that really hurts this movie are the kills. Much like with the last two movies, the kills were severely butchered by the MPAA, except this time I think it's even worse. Because with Jason Lives, some of the kills at least had a comedic touch to them. There was a joke behind some of those kills. This time around, there's no humor surrounding the kills, and the MPAA just flat out butchers them. You'll get moments where Jason's about to kill somebody and you're expecting to see gore, but then it cuts away. You can find the unedited footage on the Blu-ray or even online, and when you watch it, especially by today's standards, it doesn't look that bad. But it's a damn shame because there's one scene where Jason crushes someone's head, and in the unedited version, he squishes it and blood spewing out. Like, that is a cool kill. And there's only one kill that's really worth a damn in this movie. Maybe two. The maybe one is the party horn, because while it cuts away too quickly, it is funny to see Jason just kill somebody by stabbing a party horn in the eye. and just making that little weird noise. But the only kill in this movie that's actually worth a damn is the iconic sleeping bag kill. This is one of the most famous Friday the 13th kills out there, maybe more famous than the arrow through Kevin Bacon, where Jason Voorhees grabs a girl inside a sleeping bag and is strong enough to just whack the sleeping bag against a tree. And it's such an amazing kill, although I didn't notice this until Jason Murphy from Modern Rogue brought it up, but Jason actually grabs the sleeping bag as if he were grabbing the girl by the head, and when he slams the sleeping bag against the tree, he's slamming her feet against the tree, but when you see the girl dead, she has a cut on her head. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but regardless, it's still an iconic kill. Now let's talk about Jason himself, because even though the last movie introduced the version of Jason that we're all familiar with, the zombie Jason, this movie introduced the actor who would be the most famous for playing Jason Voorhees, Kane Hodder. Kane Hodder to Jason Voorhees is like Haruo Nakajima to Godzilla. He is the actor that took this role the most seriously. He's the most famous playing Jason Voorhees. He's the only actor who'd actually play Jason Voorhees in more than one movie. And he takes a ton of punishment and does not give up. Like in this movie alone, he crashes through some stairs that, if positioned incorrectly, he could have hit his head on a real stair. He had a roof collapsed on him. He had a couch thrown at him. He got set on fire for, at the time, a record-breaking 41 seconds. Like, he takes so much punishment in this movie that it puts Ted White's performance as Jason to shame. And another aspect that Kane Hodder brings to Jason Voorhees is the ability to just stand there and look scary just by standing. So that means you don't get any lackadaisical walks across the dock after you kill a girl with a spear gun like in Part 3. That's something I didn't mention in my review for Part 3, but it's actually one of my favorite moments in that movie because it's so silly, where Jason Voorhees just lackadaisically walks back to the house after he kills the girl with the spear gun. No, you don't get that with Kane Hodder in this movie, or any of the other movies where he plays Jason, because he took this role seriously. And also, I love the look of Jason in this movie, how some of his skin's rotting away to where you can see his bones. He's constantly wet, and he never looks dry in this movie. And even the face, when he's unmasked, looks really cool and gnarly. Really goes to show you how much of a zombie he's truly become. And all those stunts that I just talked about happen in the last 12 minutes of the movie where Jason is fighting Tina. And really, it's the only reason this movie even comes up in conversation. Because that 12 minutes is just awesome, it's thrilling, and it's hands down the best part of the movie. And again, with all the hell that Kane Hodder goes through, it's even more impressive. The only thing that really ruins it, though, well, okay, maybe not ruin it, but the only thing that brings it down is the way it ends. The ending is just so stupid, so out of nowhere that you think it was a joke. But again, this movie doesn't know if it wants to be serious or if it wants to play some things for laughs. And the ending in question is when Tina summons the ability to resurrect her dad, who comes up out of the water like he's just covered in a little bit of mud, and drags Jason down to the bottom of Crystal Lake once again to chain him up. And the movie just ends abruptly the next day, where Tina and her love interest are taken to the hospital, and then credits roll, and you're like, wow, for a movie with such an exciting and cool climax, it ended in probably the dumbest way possible. So to wrap things up, Friday the 13th The New Blood is pretty much what you'd expect from a Friday the 13th movie. Lame characters, formulaic plot, and really the only reason to watch this movie is because of Kane Hodder as Jason and the big battle between Tina and Jason. So I'd say watch at your own risk. You have to sit through a lot of crap in order to get to the good stuff, and admittedly, you'll be irritated by the lack of gore in the kills. And also, this movie brings back the nudity that was missing in the last movie. It's not as gratuitous as in Part 5, but I mean, it's there. At this point, with 7 movies in, you should know what you're getting into. And there you go, that's my review for Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. Now, tomorrow is Halloween night. I won't have anything planned in terms of a video, but I just wanted to say I hope you all have the best Halloween that you possibly can. I know 2020 has just been an absolute shithole of a year, and everyone's feeling it. So I hope these videos that I've been making have brought some joy to this miserable year. I hope you've been trying to make the best out of this year. whether you're with family or by yourself. And I just hope for the best. I hope you all have a great Halloween, whatever you're doing. And this series is not done. Like I said beforehand, I plan to do all these reviews leading up to Friday, November 13th. So we're not done with Friday the 13th just yet. Next up is going to be Part 8, and one of the worst films in the series, Jason Takes Manhattan. But first, I want to know what you guys think about The New Blood. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, leave a comment, support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until then, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one.